Hello, this is Lisa Wade, and I thank you for being with us for episode 10 of Dirt Road Divinity. Today, I am so excited to have this little opportunity to chat with dear friend, Tonia Adleta, who wears so many hats and you just bring so much fun and life and passion to so many different projects, whether it's as the host of Recovering Church Girls or the host of the Single Parent Summit or all the work you do for soulful events and helping others. It's good to see your face.
It's good to see yours. Thank you. Thank you so much for those warm words. I so appreciate it.
Well, I just really appreciate your time and the opportunity to have this conversation. You know, I know that you have Oklahoma roots. And
I do.
We happened to meet in Canada, had no idea that there would be somebody else who got, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a separate, not so much mindset, but the experience. It's that shared experience. So I remember, I was like, wait a second, you're from where? Because I lived right down the road for like 10 years.
And it's so fun to, have that experience to meet up in Canada. We then had the opportunity to meet again in Philadelphia at, heroic public speaking event. And thank you so much for encouraging that. But you've had such a fascinating kind of entrepreneur, single parent, solopreneur experience, both. And in addition to all of that, going from a pretty well-paved, possibly by other people, route to the pew. Possibly a well-paved route to the pew that was, that you later maybe decided wasn't your connection with the beyond, whatever your word is, or source. And so, years of kind of diving a little deeper to discover what matters for you. Is there anything you'd like to share about that particular journey? Let's just jump in on the hard stuff first.
Let's just get right in there. This is what we do though. And I so appreciate that. And I'm like, okay, and here we are. And I'm like literally already tearing up. Sometimes I think we forget, especially when you're deeply entrenched in the journey, and just in the process of living and knowing yourself, I think sometimes we forget all that we have already experienced and the growth that we've already co-created in our lives. And you just really brought to mind of, wow, yeah, just take a second and really look at this, which is hysterical to me because that's what I am always encouraging everyone else to do. Like even on a professional side, from the event planning side, I'm all about that. Savor the moment, really, honor and experience everything that you're creating right now. And that typical thing of like, doctor, heal thyself. We always teach what we most need. I'm like, yes. Oh, yeah, I need that. Thank you. And I have to tell you, my daughter and I took an impromptu road trip this weekend to go experience the colors. We're in Eastern Pennsylvania, so we're not too terribly far away for some really gorgeous fall fun. And at least 3 times we were on literal actual dirt roads. And Yay. I kept thinking of just like how beautiful the timing was. And I would just kept thinking about you and our conversation coming up and all the rest of it. I'm like, yep, this is just preparation. And by the way, what is the deal between the state line of Pennsylvania and New York that just didn't feel like they needed to pave this last little stretch of land? But nevertheless, so I've been looking forward to this.
Yay.
Okay, so to actually answer your question.
I loved that though.
I have a lot to say. Man, even to know where to start, right? It's just, I think this idea of the examination of what's been laid out before us in contrast perhaps with what is really singing in our souls and is really guiding us to be who we are, not even who we're meant to become, but who we are right now. I think that in and of itself is really what this is all about for me. It's peeling back those layers of, well, I thought that I was supposed to do this, or I'm holding myself up in some way, shape, or form against someone else's life, thinking that's what I'm supposed to do. And just saying, that doesn't really fit. So what does? And if anything, oh my goodness, 2020 has been a year to reevaluate anything and everything. And I feel like personally, I've hit yet another level that frankly, I didn't think I could hit. Like I thought I had re-examined everything so many different times, and you can only reinvent yourself so many times, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, here I go again. So yeah,
just keep on coming.
they sure
And
do.
we can choose how to look at that, either as, holy crap, the world's on fire and my life is, in ruins or shambles or whatever, or as, ooh, fog, another fucking opportunity for growth,
Yep.
Because that feels like what 2020 has definitely been, just in terms of how we have the opportunity to look at it, and a huge growth potential. And we'll just say, a whole lot of manure that can either we can get buried in or decide to bloom through, whichever way we take that. But it sounds like you're choosing to bloom rather than to be buried.
Absolutely. And I think what's so fascinating about this right now is that, I mean, especially I think once you start out on the personal development journey, you're always in some level of growth and of expansion and understanding. And you and I have talked about this so many times, just this, like and like the analogy of a mountain, you're going around. So you might be back at the same viewpoint, but you're higher up on the mountain. So you're seeing a different perspective of it. I know that the analogy is flawed, but you get the idea. But I think what's so fascinating about all this right now is that not only those of us who have already been on this journey, kind of enmeshed in it, but now we're seeing things collectively and in our inherent structures and the fabric of society, and everything is up for grabs, and it's up to be reevaluated and reviewed and really measured. Does this serve me personally? Does this serve humanity as a whole? Everything is being reviewed, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I think most days, but then there are moments where I'm just like, oh, fuck this, like I'm done. I'm tapping out. I am just tapping out. I need a minute,
I'm out, putting myself in time out. And that's exactly what it feels like. It's like we're on this path. I keep calling it like a collective childbirth without a collective epidural. It feels like birthing this new thing, and it's really painful, and it's frustrating, and it's hard, and they're screaming all around, and it's almost as if all the crap that doesn't fit where we're headed has to come to the surface to be evaluated, and either to be healed or to go, that really doesn't serve, either personally or collectively. And we need to find something better that does. And whether, pick your system. I mean, pick your system.
Seriously.
All the systems are up for grabs. And in doing that, people are going, wow, because it's the systems that they know and even if they don't fit, they're all they know or feel comfortable in, or maybe don't feel comfortable in, but don't know how it can look different. And so it's a collective time of anxiety, but necessary too.
Absolutely. And I think that idea of, again, once you've made a decision to embark on this personal development journey, is the best way I know how to describe it. It doesn't stop. We don't ever get to say, I mean, sure, we can take a few hours off or maybe even a few days, but there's still some piece of us that is processing, and that is embracing new data, and it's all being, cataloged and sorted. And I think that before you hit that point, I guess you could say, kind of a moment of awareness, it's so easy to stay in the circle of comfort and what is known or what is perceived to be known. And I think that that's really a lot of what we're experiencing right now collectively, is that the perception of safety is being revealed to be just that. And we really don't know what we think we knew. And that has caused a lot of trauma in between people to be revealed, and the damage can be extensive, I think, in that exposure, and really saying, what's really here, what is really under what we thought was a steady foundation, only to discover that it's nothing that we actually want to choose. So it's a big moment right now, I think.
I just need to exhale. It's like,
Yeah.
because there is so much of that. And I loved the mountain analogy. To me, personal development and even like consciousness development is like this upward spiral. It's just this upward spiral, either getting wider, narrower, however you want to look at it. But just this year, the point that you made about coming back around to what feels like a similar place, but having a different perspective or a different awareness, because you're a little higher on the spiral, might be kind of the same spot, but a little higher, which gives it just gives an opportunity to see things differently. And it feels like that's what we're being asked to do, just this year. When COVID and stuff hit in the beginning, my daughter and I moved in with my mom for like 3 months. The little cottage that we had moved into had been promised, to somebody else to be rented for a couple of months. So we moved in with mom. And it was almost like this coming back to the womb feeling. But here, I thought I would be living elsewhere right now. And I'm, definitely committed to being in Oklahoma, until my daughter graduates. And it feels like this opportunity to really appreciate roots in a different way and how they inform me rather than just trying to run from them, which, And so, but that wouldn't have been possible had it not been for kind of a different perspective. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. I love that. It just kind of the process, the evolution, for lack of a better word. Sometimes I get really annoyed with the words that become cliche in the spiritual journey again, even like, I mean, just like, okay, come on, really? I'm like, there really aren't any other words that give us the containers for what it is that we're really talking about. So I just officially apologize right now for any time I'm using a cliche. I hate them. And yet sometimes it's the only thing I have available.
And because it's cliche, other people get it. So
that's true. That's a fair point.
All right. One of the things that you said earlier was the idea of not just appreciating and looking toward future self, but really sinking into and appreciating who you are right this very second. Just appreciating right now and the person that you've become right now. And partly as a way of getting to whatever that future vision might be.
So true.
Greater grace. I've seen you say in the past that you're a dreamer, and I love that, but also the idea that, and I'll get the words wrong, but that one of the greatest forms of self-love is intentionally creating a life that you love. And what does that mean? What's that journey looked like for you from your big do-over button,
right?
Share that experience too, to kind of where you are now.
That's such a good question. That is one of my favorite things to talk about, is this idea of, really it requires a level of self-awareness and self-knowing and self-compassion to be able to know what really lights you up and to strategically build a life around that. It takes a lot of guts. And I'm not saying that just because I've done it, because some days I don't do it. But I think it's more about the permission that we give ourselves in that process to try to ask the questions, to look for the answers, to quiet ourselves and let the answers come up because they're already here. That was a really hard lesson for me because I'm a planner. Like professionally speaking, I have been in wedding and event planning for over 2 decades. I like contingency plans. I like my spreadsheets and my timelines and my backup plan to my backup plan. So to take that and then try to shift and say, okay, what part of this is serving me? What part of it is not? And to learn to be in the moment and to learn to actually hear myself through all those spreadsheets and all those scraps of paper with my notes in my office. That was a pretty big transition. And I think that's one of those things that I will always be learning. Kind of like I call myself the recovering church girl. It's the same idea. For me personally, I need to recognize that this is part of who I am and acknowledge it without giving it the power to overtake the way that I show up in that exact moment. So by saying I'm a recovering perfectionist, I'm a recovering workaholic, and I'm a recovering people pleaser, that's my trifecta, that takes some doing to undo the effects of that at play in my life, for sure.
And the courage of that awareness is even just a place to start. And it feels like you don't, hopefully, but it feels like in the way you just described it, that you don't beat yourself up too much about it, because you recognize that maybe that doesn't help.
Well,
today
today I'm doing pretty good on that one. But really it's a constant process. You know, and I'm back in therapy for probably about a year now, as I was working on the podcast and on the book, and just so much was coming back up, and I was like, hold on, this is not a good idea for me to go this alone. So even in that process, there's been so much that I have needed to work through to accept grace and compassion for myself, from myself to myself, you know, in that whole process. You know, and for my family of origin, and for the church family that I grew up with, and just really, there's needed to be a lot of release of expectation, not only for myself, but also for all the various people that were involved. And I do truly believe that most people in the church have good hearts, and they want good things. And this is, you know, what is laid out for them. I also believe that very few have taken the time as of yet to unpack the layers of the effects of organized religion and of the culture within the church. I don't get into dogma. What each person chooses to believe for themselves, I think, is sacred. And I think somewhere we've lost the sacredness of that individual spiritual journey for sake of conformity. That I refuse to tolerate any longer in my life in any way, shape, or form. Hence the reason why my hair is off-centered. This is literally a choice that I made a few months ago, where it was just kind of like, you know what? I think I need to kind of flip a giant middle finger off to any traditional standards. I'm going gray naturally. I cannot wait. I'm so excited to go gray. And it was also like, okay, well, how else can I have an outward expression of, your rules don't apply to me, thanks though.
I love it. I love it. I'm guessing that has not always been a mindset. That in
no.
and everything else, there was probably a whole lot of, ooh, let me be the good girl that fits into these rules really, 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 really. In fact, let me be a superstar at fitting into the rules.
Let's rack up all the gold stars.
So what was it? Is there a moment? Is there like a shift in thinking? What was it that kind of shifted that for you?
I think it's been a gradual process. It's so ironic to me, because even as a child, as I was very much wanting everyone's approval, and I was, you know, becoming the poster child for the youth group, and I was going on the short-term missions trips and doing the fundraisers and, you know, all the things, getting all those gold stars, I still didn't like to be painted into a corner or put in a box. So there was still this very independent streak, but it showed up in ways that still had a foundation of conformity or of seeking approval. So it was kind of this this internal struggle even then of, I want to go my own way and I want everyone to like me. So, you know, experiencing that as a kid in church, and we moved a ton. I think I figured out we moved 16 times before I graduated high school. So I was really good at being the new kid, which was fascinating, because, you know, sometimes like we'd move to an area and I was the cool new kid, and then we'd move again and I was the not so cool new kid. So, you know, I really got to experience a lot of who do I want to be right now? How am I showing up? I didn't have the language to understand that's what I was doing at that point, or the maturity. But really, it's a fascinating way to experience the first couple of decades on this earth. With all of that to be said, more specifically, I think it really has been an evolution in that process of first recognizing the patterns that are there, recognizing the structural construct basically of conformity, and what does that really look like? Because it's not that necessarily all conformity is bad, but again, it's so much peeling back of layer after layer of, okay, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. Who said? Why did they say that? What do they get out of me fulfilling this obligation? What happens to my mind? What happens to my soul when I cut off this part of me to fit into this box? So it really, it's a constant and consistent thing, I think.
Yeah. And it's one thing if you're talking hairstyle for conformity. It's another
Right.
thing if you're talking your soul, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah, this will grow back.
yeah, putting the soul in a too small box, I've experienced how that just kind of feel like this, you know? There's something about a wilting inside. So rather than your soul singing, feeling expansive, it's like hunkered down and just waiting for the next shoe to drop, whatever that shoe is. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think what happens there too, the kind of the side effect that very few people talk about is the damage that we do to ourselves in that process. I mean, yes, we can blame the system, we can blame the patriarchy, we can blame fill in the blank, but in reality, we are committing the crime against ourselves in pursuit of approval or the gold star or whatever else. So the fallout is a reconciliation is required, again, for us, with us, to us, as a very intimate process. I needed to forgive myself. I needed to understand where I didn't show up for myself. And, you know, I can go back and I can identify certain moments throughout my history. I remember the exact moment where I didn't show up for myself in my marriage to my kid's dad. And while, you know, we were married for 7.5 years, I look at that point, 6 months in, where I was like, right there, that's where I agreed to play the role instead of be who I am. So I hold myself responsible for that. You know, that's on me. That has nothing to do with anything else. But that was a pivotal moment. So being able to recognize those moments and then do the work to make amends with ourselves. Because I think until we get to that point, creating a life you love sounds like something you read on a poster at the old accessory store. Like it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I very much believe, and it feels like you do too, the idea that self-love isn't just, you know, the pedicures and salt baths, but it's the willingness to look at your own bullshit and look at all the ways that we put ourselves and our passions, our needs, everything else last, or the ways we can all be assholes sometimes too. But to look at all that and examine it, have that awareness and go, okay, I can do things differently. And I want to, and I choose to do things differently. But without a willingness to have open eyes to our own shortcomings or our own screw ups, you know, in the past, whatever they may look like, but without all the self-judgment, you know, and I think that's the thing. Beating ourselves up just, you know, gives us one more thing to get over. You know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think with that too, the idea of, you know, growing up in organized religion, there's a lot of guilt that comes along with that. That entire world is very guilt heavy. And there's a predisposition to martyr ourselves anyway. Yeah. So when you put all of that together, I want to be really clear, by no means is there any victim shaming here. We do need to recognize the damage that the culture has done. We need to acknowledge and name the things that have been perpetrated against us. And we don't have to stay in those cycles. So I think there's a lot of and going on. As a matter of fact, that's my next tattoo, and I'm so excited and I can't wait. Is the ampersand is, you know, really, I think so often, especially right now in this moment, there are so many forces at play that try to create this either or type scenario. And I refuse to accept duality as a way of life. So the ampersand for me is just something like, I cannot wait to get this on me. Just as a consistent and outward reminder of there's always an and. There's always an and sometimes it takes a shit ton of work to find it, but it's there.
I love that. I love that. So tattoos, and leads me to another word, which is travel. I know you're a gal who loves to get the stamp in the passport.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What has travel meant to your soul's growth and kind of your connection with something?
Well, I have to tell you, even as you said that, the physiological response, like I just released my breath. I didn't even realize I was holding it, and just felt this like,
Oh.
that's my favorite. Yeah, it really, it is very hard to explain the impact that travel has had on my life. I know you get it because you're a fellow traveler, but it's funny to me because I feel like people are either travelers or they're not, or maybe they're not yet travelers. Like, again, to the whole idea, it can't be either or, there's got to be an and. Maybe they're just not yet travelers. So with that, I mean, I mentioned I was involved in short-term missions as a teenager, and even then I really struggled with the idea of like, are we doing any good? You know, you get 30, 50 teenagers that show up in a small village in Haiti, and what are we actually doing, and what happens when we leave? And standing in the Port-au-Prince airport with sweat literally rolling off my body, which I've never experienced quite like that before, and being swarmed with so many people and just overwhelmed with humanity that wasn't like me, was that first moment of, okay, I need this. I need to learn more about this. I need to understand where I start and where I stop, and where we start and we stop, and understand my piece in something much greater. And again, I'm not even talking about religious beliefs here. I'm talking about humanity as a whole. So that was the first little piece. And then I remember the first trip that I took after my divorce from the kid's dad. I went to Paris, and I went to Italy, ironically enough, for a wedding class. I am officially certified in Italian destination weddings, if anybody wants to take me up on that. I've been certified for 15 years, but not like it's ever actually happened. But the experience of being in Italy and being in France, just really losing myself and finding myself all at the same time. I think to this day, one of my most favorite things was being mistaken as a French woman in Paris and accurately giving directions in French to a couple of American businessmen. And then being mistaken for an Italian in Rome. And it was just those little moments of like, yeah, maybe there is more to what we have in common and what we can experience collectively than these individual labels that we hold so desperately tight to. And I think about that now in the moment that we are experiencing in our country. And all the more just the cognitive dissonance is just deafening to me lately. And frankly, it's gotten louder, and I don't understand how that's possible. I thought I was already like to here, and I'm just like, nope, we're up here now. Travel helps me make sense of that. And it helps me come back to what I know to be true in a way that sometimes I can't access here in my little corner.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. And the humanity part, when I traveled to Egypt last November, it's kind of a divine assignment, a divine nudge. Need you to buy a ticket to Cairo, need you to go. I'm like, okay, single white female traveler.
I so love that you were that person, by the way, though, that you're just like, okay, let's go. I love that.
There's something about coming back to self. And I think one of the things I realized about that, I have so long felt like a fish out of water, whether it's, well, in a whole lot of ways, and I feel for some reason, I feel way more like myself when I'm kind of the ultimate fish out of water, because
yes,
in like the Hathor temple at Dendera in Egypt, this group of like little 8-year-old schoolboys, they were there on a class trip. I don't know how old they are. We're 8 to 10, something like that. But lady, they wanted a picture with the yellow-haired lady, because I don't think they'd ever seen this before.
Right.
It was so adorable. But I found that by staying out of like the big hotel chains and instead staying in the smaller places and actually having the chance to meet people and have conversations and sit down to a meal and enjoy the interaction, that to me was absolutely the most beautiful part.
Absolutely.
Because it came back to that shared humanity, sitting around an outdoor cook fire with a Bedouin family with like 8 or 9 little kids playing peekaboo with me, and we played chase, and it was fun. But you could tell that they were as curious about me as I was curious about learning more about them, not with the judgment, not with the fear, not with all the bullshit, but it's like,
right.
we're kind of taught that we should,
Mm-hmm.
It was none of that. It was all love and curiosity. And to me, travel, that's such a beautiful way to travel, is with love and curiosity. And so I love that you share that, and the idea of coming back to you, but also seeing your point in the bigger, your place in the bigger humanity, the bigger point. That matters.
And I love that you mentioned curiosity. I had mentioned that we just went away this past weekend, my daughter and myself. And I noticed when I would go from being curious and being excited about what the next part of the adventure would hold to when I became critical. And I don't necessarily mean critical even in a negative context. I know so often it's used in that way. But again, think about my career. I've spent 2.5 decades as a curator. It is literally my job to be critical and to think in advance of things that could go wrong and have the backup plans for those. But I'm creating an experience every single step of the way. Whether it's for a couple getting married, it's for their guests coming in, it's for the corporate clients, the community they're creating, any which way you slice it, I'm curating an experience, which means I have to be critical of all the various details coming into play and whether they serve the end goal or not. So all of that to say, going back to travel, I noticed the moment that I went from being curious about something to being critical and saying, oh, well, I would have done it differently, or I would have, any sort of thing where I was putting myself into the mix. And I saw it happen. And I was like, oh, that's the thing right there. Because I've been saying for the last couple of years, like, I want to develop the kind of curiosity that I have when I'm traveling. I want to develop that in my day-to-day life. I feel like it's so easy to become so comfortable and just to be rather complacent with our day-to-day life, our day-to-day interaction with each other, especially, again, all the politics and the drama and all the rest of it. We get so critical and so complacent when we lose the wonderment of curiosity. So that was a really pivotal moment for me. And I realized, granted, I had just come off a multiple day virtual event, and I probably had no business driving 14 hours in 48 hours immediately thereafter. But I noticed that moment. I was like, okay, what do I need? What's going on with me? Why am I all of a sudden getting critical? And I'm tired. All of a sudden it just hit me. I'm tired. I want to go home and I want to sleep. Yeah. And that's what we did. So it was a really interesting moment, that tension between curiosity and criticism. So for me, it was a big lesson, and I don't think I would have learned it if I was just sitting at home.
Ooh, now that's an interesting point. Yes.
Because I would have been too comfortable.
Yeah.
What would there have been to be critical of other than I still haven't finished the wood trim in my office yet? And I'm like sitting here looking at trim on the floor and my saws and I've got my nail gun around here somewhere, but yeah.
I love the project of redoing your home, the fixer-upper, and that you're doing an awful lot of the work. I love that. Thank you.
As much as I can anyway. My dad's been very helpful, but I'm doing a lot.
That's incredibly cool. I know you had talked before about being a recovering workaholic and the idea of, I think for many of us, staying overly busy is almost like a trauma response. And that's one that I really had to look at, and that I wrote about in my first book, that, I was smack dab in the middle of a soul crushing, situation. And my response to that was, let me just stay as busy as possible and put on the good face so I don't feel that, going on the inside. How do you break that?
Oh. Let me know if you find out. No, I'm just teasing. I mean, it's better than what it has been. But yeah, so many different layers coming up in my mind to answer that. One of the first things I'm thinking of is an awareness in our bodies that I never knew growing up. Again, you know, part of the dogma in the religion I grew up in was that your bodies are not to be trusted. And, you know, there's very much this dividing of the spirituality is the most important part. Nothing else matters. Your emotions don't matter. Your physicality doesn't matter. You know, there was such a separation of self, and then an elevation of spirituality at all costs, but only in this exact format. Anything outside of that was not permitted. So for me personally, that has been a big part of it, of reuniting my relationship with myself, with my physical body, and understanding and recognizing when I was starting to experience the stress. I'm really good at internalizing stress. And again, I've been doing it for 25 years, taking care of everyone else and everyone else's problems or perceived problems or what could become problems that nobody else needs to know about because I'm going to fix them before they happen. But what would happen is that I'd come back from, you know, a wedding at 2:00 in the morning. I can't sleep for another 2 hours because my mind is still solving problems that never happened. I would wake up with nightmares from events that had happened years before, literal nightmares that have woken me up from the fear of something going wrong. So this workaholic piece, definitely part of my my repertoire, to say. And I think the body healing component has been really important to me. So when I look at like chiropractic or massage therapy or the Epsom salt baths or grounding, any of these little practices, they're not light and fluffy for me. They are required maintenance for me to stay on top of this, because even just the past few months, the amount of stress that I have internalized, even though I am aware of it now and I'm using all the tools available, I've been in extreme discomfort because I've fallen back into those things. Even though I'm aware and I'm using all the tools I have, I still have a lot to learn, and a lot to undo and make amends for. So the body awareness, I think for me, has been a big piece of it.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like you were listening to your body on your trip when it was just like, I'm tired. You know, and
you know, sometimes coffee just doesn't cut it.
Damn it.
I know, right?
More caffeine, please. I'm so glad it's legal.
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine otherwise.
I would be in trouble. And one thing I keep getting is that with this energetic, just crazy time that we are living in, and all the us versus them, just all the stuff that's, you know, up here, that I've talked to so many people that are just like, I just want to sleep. And it's almost as if sleep is even that much more important to be able to give our bodies a break, to just be able to navigate and kind of ride the waves of these wild times. And that's one thing I'm finding for myself. I was normally a 4 or 5, maybe 6 hour night sleeper, maybe on good times. And I have to get more right now. I have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was doing really well working out with my neighbor in the morning, socially distanced, you know, in her garage. She's on one day and I'm on the other. However, over the past couple of weeks, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a really, really shitty accountability partner right now, because I need sleep. It's worked out just as it needed to, because, you know, she needed to adjust her schedule for her. But just to be able to give ourselves the grace and the space to adjust what we need. I am right there with you. Sleep, and the things that I think we sometimes take for granted. Even just last night, I was like, okay, I'm getting hungry. What is actually something that will help me, not just give me the nice little feels good to have a piece of chocolate or, you know, like that kind of thing. But I'm like, what do I actually need? I was like, oh, I need some protein. But just to be able to ask that question, there were decades of my life that it would never occur to me that I was hungry. I can't tell you how many times I've worked for 12, 14 hours and went like, oh shit, I forgot to eat again. It wasn't something I was good at in terms of taking care of myself. So there's a lot of layers to that body awareness piece. And I think sometimes we do trivialize self-care, physical self-care as, you know, fluff, or, well, yeah, of course you're supposed to drink more water. Of course you're supposed to get more sleep. But are we really doing it?
Yeah. Honoring the temple, you know, honoring that connection, because I do believe that there's something real about the body can't really lie to us. You know? I mean, our mind can, to me, it's a pretty sketchy GPS. It's great at developing the plans, you know, to implement the whatever, great at the strategic thinking piece, the let's put the foundations in order. And we spend, as a culture, we spend so much of our time and place so much priority on everything that happens above the neck, you know, neck up. And when we're that disconnected from our heart, you know, from our feelings, from our spirit, from our body,
right?
It's amazing to me. You know, there have been times, even when I'm trying to connect with spirit and I'm getting certain messages and whatever, that my body will have an overwhelming sense of foreboding. You think I'd pay attention to that, you know, especially when it happens on multiple occasions. I always find when I don't, I regret it, always. And so I've really had to become aware of honoring all four aspects, you know, but especially that body talking to me, because it has insights and clues that, and can communicate, whether it's through pain, through tiredness, through that gut feeling of, you know, or excitement or butterflies of, ooh, you know, the joy inside where you're like, this is it. This is what blows the soul open. You know, last night I'm in my mom's dining room. So coming live from mom's dining room right now. When we lived up here, I brought my Jeep up. I have this old Jeep and I love this old Jeep, but I needed to get it back. And I don't quite, to where I live now, I don't quite trust the Jeep enough to drive after dark without a little backup, because she's, I mean, 1974, she's old, you know, I'm not going to say old, she's younger than I am, but you get the point. But last night, driving on these crooked back roads, full moon out, Jeep didn't have a top on, so it's topless, the wind in my hair, I cheese grated for
yeah.
I was so glad for a windshield, because otherwise I would have you know, bugs all in my teeth.
I love it.
At night. And I'm like, this is my soul being happy.
Yeah.
That's what this feels like. And so then to think about, and where else in life, you know, does that happen? The fact that you went out and looked at, you know, the color changing, got out and went and looked. Did you find that kind of connecting with nature in that way, even though it maybe was what helped you realize that you were tired, but that it brought some renewed something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, I'd always heard people talk about like, oh, well, when you're stressed, go out in nature. I was like, sure. Like, I've got time for that. Or that it needed to be some big elaborate thing. Like, you know, all of a sudden I'm going to become that person that goes up to the mountains and goes camping overnight. And therefore I need all the extra gear and I need to learn how to do this. That's not at all what's required, but that's how complicated my mind wanted to make it. And it really wasn't. It's so funny that you mentioned the moon last night. I was taking the dog out before we went to bed last night, and the position of the moon, it was so freaking bright and it was just gorgeous. And it was one of those things. I mean, I have conversations with the moon all the time. And it just, something about its exact position, how bright it was, like all of the rest of it. I was like, I'm like, well, hi, I haven't seen you for a while. And I'm just like, just chatting with the moon. And again, I had that stupid cheesy grin on my face because I was just so freaking happy that it was so full and so beautiful. And I got to see, and just the position of the stars. I mean, just all of it. It was one of those moments where I was fully alive, fully in that moment. I wasn't thinking about the to-do list or, you know, anything, just happy to see the moon.
I love that. I love that.
It's just the little things sometimes.
So what's next on the horizon for you?
Oh my gosh, that's the big question. I have been saying for quite some time that come October 5th, everything gets reevaluated. I've been trying to retire from weddings for probably about 3 years now, at least 2. And I have the last wedding this Saturday. So there's this piece of, okay, I've been working on this other program that is for couples getting married without a planner. I've been trying to launch that for the last 2 years, and something has kept holding me back, and I still haven't quite figured out exactly what. So I'm like, well, maybe it's I finally get that launched and get that done. And at the same time, I recognize that I love that community. I'm happy to help because it's something I know very well, and frankly, I'm really good at. And it doesn't feed my soul the way it used to. So that brings me back to recovering church girls, because that is work that I believe strongly in. I think that I had moments like Glennon Doyle released Untamed earlier this summer. And my first thought was, shit, she wrote my book. It's just like, well, what's the point? I'm not even going to bother anymore. And I didn't really believe it when I said it, but boy, did I feel it, of just this complete, like, who's going to listen to me when they've got Glennon to listen to? And really having to work through that of like, it's not exactly the same. And there are pieces that I need to say that I may be the only person willing to say them right now. And that's not something I can take lightly. Also means not something to take myself too seriously on, because frankly, if I don't follow through on the idea will find someone else. So recognizing just what a gift it is to be able to be a part of this moment, and to have the strength and the courage to say, we need to look at the effects of the culture of organized religion. We need to look at the effects of patriarchy. We need to look at the purity culture. We need to look at all of the ways that this has separated from ourselves. And we need to learn how to come home to who we really are, to come home to ourselves, so that we can then be in a place to know who we are, to know what we love to do, to know what brings joy, to know how to affect change in humanity. Like, I think that's the piece that has me the most excited about what's next. And like my daughter is getting ready to graduate high school. So what does that mean? For me, I'm pretty sure it's going to mean a few stamps in the passport. So, just kind of bringing it all together. And on one hand, as much as I'm anxious to get started, I'm also content that in this moment I can rest, and I can rest without feeling judgment, that I should be being productive, or that I need a to-do list, or I need to totally change my business model so that I can be more successful. I'm like, I think I'm good. I think I'm okay. I think that I can give myself the space to embrace the unknown. And for a planner, that's a pretty big accomplishment.
Yes. And all I want to say to all of that is thank you. Thank you for looking out for my friend in that way. When we see people we care about kind of sinking into the recognition that you just came to, and that the things that do light you up and feed your soul and feel joy, that those are valuable and worthy and important enough to be a priority. To see a friend say that about their own lives, it just makes me go, hug, virtual. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, before we jump off, is there anything that you would like to share? Any invitations to folks? How can people find you? Is there just one more message?
Gosh, I have no idea. I've been ridiculously terrible about any sort of social media or email list or anything the past few months. I think part of it honestly has been a really kind of somewhat confused and heartfelt intention to sort it all out. What's the point of this? I want relationship. I want connection. And so to that end, find me on Facebook, send me an email, what have you. Absolutely. But I want to be very careful to maintain a level of authenticity that I don't see in social media right now. And I'm very hesitant to continue playing that game. So find me. I want to talk. I want to connect. I might have a little funky way of looking at it for a little bit. So please be patient. Eventually the podcast will come back, I promise. Eventually the book will actually come out. But yeah, so in the meantime, I'm here.
I love it. I love it. Well, I appreciate your time and your energy and insights. You've got such a big heart and just so much wisdom. And I'm grateful that you were willing to share that with us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the conversation, and just at the risk of like being super cheesy and turning this into a love fest, I'm so grateful, which actually it's not a bad thing. Why would I hedge that? But I'm so grateful for our friendship, and I'm grateful for the space that you have held for me over the years, and just the moments that we have in these kinds of conversations. They are healing and gratifying and just joy-filled, and I'm grateful for that.
Right back at you. Thank you. Thank you so much. For all of you out there listening or watching, this has been episode 10 of Dirt Road Divinity with Tonia Adleta. You can see this also over on YouTube. It'll be posted soon. And I hope you'll join us next Thursday at 11 a.m. Central for another fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Tonia.
Thank you.